Starts to play.
Face of this earth that can keep you out of hell. It's not Baptist, it's not Methodist, it's not Presbyterian, it's not Catholic, it's not Jew. There's just one name that can keep you out of hell, and it's the name of Jesus.
Lighten up, Francis.
Hey, welcome to the Atheistville Ask An Atheist series. My name is Mike, and we are here with our special guest this evening, Cynthia McDonald. I've been very excited to have her on the show. I met Cynthia 2-3 months ago or so, I guess. And it's been such a pleasure to get to know her. So let me give you a little bit of background on Cynthia. Cynthia is a passionate health advocate who's committing to helping others, led to a career in social work, which I actually just realized that not too long ago, Cynthia, that you were a social worker. She holds a bachelor's of science and a certification in community health. She's the author of the freedmenhealthandwellness.com. She explores the social determinants of health affecting the Black Americans descending from chattel slavery. Cynthia is the head of the Chicago chapter of the Black Nonbelievers, which is where I met her. She's a regular host of the Nonprofits produced by the atheist community of Austin, and she's appeared on and hosted numerous podcasts. And she's also spoken at conventions. Most recently, at least the most recent I've attended, was the American Humanist Association here in Chicago. And she is she's also a health equity, social and economic justice is something she's very passionate, and her work with publishing across various platforms. So with all that, welcome, Cynthia.
Thanks, Mike. Thank you so much for actually inviting me. I appreciate it so much.
Oh, absolutely. You know, like I said, I was very excited to have you on. I've been, the first day I met you, I was like, oh, we've got to get Cynthia on this show. And I, you know, just to give people a little bit of background, the reason I specifically met Cynthia is, I told her the day I went there, I started looking on Reddit, I believe. And I said, there's got to be organizations for different people of color. Because as a white middle-aged guy, I have my own perspective, but I can only have my own perspective. I can guess what other groups might think or do, but I just really can't know. And someone specifically said, hey, there's a group in Chicago that are the Black Nonbelievers. You should check them out. And I was like, all right. So I looked you guys up and I went down to your meeting and I was like, yeah, this is exactly what I was looking for. Because you had such a good conversation. In fact, that was actually one of the things that impressed me so well. And as I've gotten to know you now, it seems obviously sort of second nature for you, but you did such a good job at having a discussion and asking pointed questions that I would have never, two things, I would have never known to ask. And quite frankly, I probably wouldn't have asked. Because again, as a white person, I'm like, oh, some of these questions are uncomfortable, to be quite frank, you know, but it was uncomfortable in a good way. It's like, this is exactly the stuff that I want to know and I want to hear, and I want to hear people's perspective. Mm-hmm. So that's why I went down to meet Cynthia and met various members of the group. And I've been back. My wife and I have been back many times now, and it's been fantastic. So thank you for that.
And thank you for coming. It's so good to have different people to come, even though that we say that, yes, we do amplify Black voices, but we want all types of people to come to the meetings and to participate in the discussions or just to hang out. I mean, like, even though like lately, like, we've been having like more discussion meetings, yesterday was a debate between an atheist and a theist. And that was, we can get more into that a little bit later, but it was really good. But we are a group of human beings that want to just create community for people and just make sure that we are able to hold space for people who are coming out of religion. And it's, even though that we are the Black Nonbelievers, we welcome everybody. So I was like super excited when I first saw you and Mary Jane actually walk in. I was like, oh my God, that's so great with people. I was so happy. Yeah. But yeah,
it was great.
Yeah,
and you guys were very welcoming. The whole group was very welcoming. And like I said, and as I said, no one pulled any punches. It was a good conversation. And there were times where it's like, I'm on the wrong side of history just in terms of my color on some of these questions. But this is exactly the kind of stuff that is like, I want to hear, because I don't know what it's like to grow up as a Black person and then ultimately to leave your religion. And as we'll get into, because I really want to dig into this and have you explain it to the audience, it's a different thing for your community than it is for my community. I can have my own challenges and this, that, and the other. But one of the things, and I want to say it was Titus, and I may be off on that.
Which is in the chat right now, by the way.
Oh, is he? Okay, fantastic. Hi, Titus. And he mentioned, he was specific. There's two comments that came out of that struck me early on. He mentioned that when you think of Black leaders, they're almost always religious. Right. Al Sharpton, Martin Luther King, even as I was talking to somebody else, Louis Farrakhan, Malcolm X, they may not be Christian, but they're still religious leaders. So there's a religious component at the bottom and the foundation of so much Black movement and Black leaders throughout our more recent history, certainly since the civil rights era. And I was like, we don't have that in that same way, Mm-hmm. And then somebody, and you may have been the one that asked the question, which I thought was fascinating. You said, or it was said, do you feel like being an atheist is betraying your Blackness? Which I was just floored with that question, because like, I would never connect that to my race. It's just an atheist. It's something I can do, and blah, blah, blah. But no one's questioning. And I remember people, because there were people in person there and on because you were broadcasting it, people were sending questions in, right? And they were saying that people would ask them, why are you trying to be white? I was like, what? So it was such a fascinating conversation. We're going to get in all that. I'm jumping way ahead. Let's not do that. Let's actually wind it all the way back. And let's talk about where you started in terms of, tell me a little bit about your upbringing, how religion was involved in that, what religion you were before you deconverted or deconstructed. Right.
Yeah, I had a bit of a journey, Michael. So I was born and raised Christian, specifically Episcopal. Okay. So I was christened at like 2-3 months old. My mom put me in a very frilly white thing. Yeah. I wish I had the picture, like when I came back to the house, because I looked upset that I was in this frilly white thing as a 2-month-old.
You're already problems.
Yeah, already. Like we're seeing problems here, But so I was raised in that denomination. At the same time, like later on when I got older, I went to Catholic school. So K through 12, I was in Catholic school. I first started off at a school called St. Clotilde. And then I want to say like in the 3rd grade, I transferred to another school that was closer to my father's house, which was called St. Felicitas. And I had the typical, Roman Catholic school education, including going to religion class and the like, right? And also attending mass every 3rd Sunday. at that particular school, and then going to Episcopal Mass,
Oh,
all
wow.
the other Sundays with my mom and my grandma and,
Okay. Yeah.
others. Yeah, yeah. So, so that was basically the foundation of like my Christian upbringing.
Okay.
However, when I got older and I went to college, that's the first time I actually went to a public school per se.
Okay.
I started off at Eastern Illinois University in Charleston, Illinois.
Yeah.
And then I transferred and graduated from Millikan University in Decatur, Illinois. So both
Okay.
central Illinois, right?
Yeah.
And when I was at Eastern, one of the things like I did enjoy always was gospel music. I used to
Yes.
love like the singing, the instrumentation, the whole gambit, even like the actrix that came with the performance. Like
Right.
it was, yeah. It was all that, right? And when I was in college, I joined a gospel choir that was established there. I would say like after the first year, I ended up becoming like the choir director.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, yeah. It was kind of fast. I was like, wait, hold on. Is this what I'm doing right now? Okay. But like I ended up becoming a music major, music education, because I was going to teach school, right? Mostly like high school, like music. But I got a lot of training as far as like teaching music by rote in
Mhm.
the choir, as well as singing like sacred music in the formal choirs that were beholding to the music majors that were part of that school.
Okay.
And I would say that one of the things that impressed me, that's because that's the best word that I can come up with, is as much as I can, is the emotion and passion that people had on Sundays when they expressed themselves.
Yeah.
And that was not the way that I would say that Episcopals and Roman Catholics express themselves. Of course, like
Yeah.
we were not a very overtly passionate and expressive people in church, right?
Right.
We had our bells and we had our smells, and then we
Bells and
had the
smells.
announcements. We ate our bread, which was
Yeah.
basically a cracker or a wafer, and drank our wine, which me and my mom was talking about yesterday, which was like, remember when you used to send me to the store to buy Manischewitz? And she was
Oh
like,
my
yeah.
God,
And
man.
everybody, and she would say that, yeah, if we didn't have Manischewitz or Mogen David, like people complained about the sacramental wine, right?
Really?
So,
Oh
yeah,
my.
because like those are like sweeter wines, and so people
Yeah,
like
the
enjoyed
Manischewitz
those
is
more.
too
Yeah,
sweet. I can't
yes,
stand it.
it's extremely sweet, right?
Yeah.
But
Dessert.
people liked it,
Oh,
so
yeah.
yeah, they
It
liked it.
doesn't
So
doesn't offend the palate. It's very
yeah,
sweet.
yeah, it does, especially. So like, if you didn't have Manischewitz or Mogen David, it's a problem, right? But like when you went to like those more like evangelical charismatic faiths, like they use like a juice, like a red juice or like
Oh, really?
yeah, they didn't use alcohol, right? Like there was like not like an
Oh.
alcohol based wine. It was more like like a fruity juice, like a red
Yeah.
fruity juice, and your wafer, for your communion. And
Okay. I
as
didn't know that.
like yeah, and I mean, even though like with Episcopals and like Catholics, because like Episcopals was like basically Catholic, like Catholic-esque, because Catholic with a little c.
Yeah,
um
that's funny.
Yeah, we used to do like communion every Sunday, but in like other like charismatic faiths, like they would do communion once a month, right?
Oh, I didn't know that either. Yeah, because I
Yeah,
was raised
yeah,
Episcopal as well. So you and I have very similar backgrounds. So everything you're
y-
saying,
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah,
smells and the bells, I totally understood it.
yeah,
But
yeah.
I didn't realize that communion wasn't a common, a frequent thing. Because like you said, we did it every Sunday, right?
Right.
That was it was part of every service, right?
Yeah,
I didn't
yeah.
realize that wasn't. Now I kind of maybe guessed on the alcohol. 'Cause my mom's Southern Baptist now down in
Mm,
Florida. And yeah, she has to, well, I'm going to say because she doesn't have to hide because she doesn't drink alcohol at all. But, you know, if she were to drink an occasional wine, she could not tell anybody. So I'm going to leave that out there in case anyone she knows watches this. But yeah, I didn't think about the fact you're right. They probably wouldn't drink wine, but I thought it would be more frequent. That's interesting. It's you and I and the Catholics really that do this weekly, huh?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Like, you know, all the Protestants
Yeah.
and the Catholics, you know, we do it like like when we were part of that particular, you know, religion,
Yeah.
we did it every week. But like, yeah, Baptists, like, you know, Church of God in Christ, Pentecostals, Maranathas, you know, all the other Protestants that happen to be more of evangelical leaning did not do it every week. Hey Andrew. So I see this particular question. Do you think that you would have more trouble leaving the church if it had been Southern Baptist rather than Episcopal? Well, that's a good question. I don't know. I really don't know. And only because like I came, even though I was like, you know, raised Episcopal, I kind of went into that more dogmatic, controlling holiness church atmosphere.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it took me a while to deconvert. So like if I can just continue on.
Yeah.
Okay, so while I was at my first college, I thought that it would be a really good idea for me to get saved. So I did the whole saved thing. And, you know, confessed with my mouth and believed in my heart and yada, yada, yada. And then I guess like, you know, some magic things happened and I got saved. Right.
Yeah.
And, you know, I would definitely say that I was very committed to this whole like lifestyle of like what salvation life meant. Including like, you know, really being like super passionate about like the music that I performed and created. You know, for a while there, I would not even listen to like secular music. And I listened to what I found out much later, problematic people on the radio who were part of that like Christian nationalist Southern evangelical space that I was not privy. I did not understand at that particular time. And I think a lot of it is because like I was still very young. I then joined a church that was, they call themselves non-denominational, but they were out of the Black Pentecostal Church of God in Christ tradition. Okay.
Really?
And yeah.
And they were non-denominational, but out of Pentecostal? That seems almost opposite.
Yeah. I mean, I think that they just didn't want to necessarily attach themselves to that bigger organization. They wanted to be more autonomous.
Okay.
But when it came to like the rituals and how they perceived and even like, you know, how they interpreted, you know, the Bible and teachings that came from that faith, it was very much so rooted and grounded in the Pentecostal Church of God in Christ, Azusa type ministry point of view, right? So they call themselves like a holiness church.
Okay, yeah, I've heard the term. I mean, grew up in Florida, so it wasn't uncommon down there. There was actually a church like a mile down the street in my neighborhood that was a Pentecostal church. So yeah.
And I mean, and especially when it comes to like how you present yourself, how you dress, how you speak, even like, you know, how you behave, it's very like conservative.
Yeah, I was very strict, right?
Yes.
He's very strict. Yeah. Yes. I mean, in the Pentecostal, and correct me wrong, you probably know more. It's a hop, skip, and a jump from Pentecostal to speaking in tongues to handling serpents. It's on the same line, right? It's certainly on a different line than Catholics and Episcopal, right?
Yeah, it totally is. Like, you know, because like, of course, like the more like pervasive, like Pentecostals, especially like I would say like in the South or like more rural areas would be probably more apt to snake handling.
Yeah, I've never actually seen that, but
I mean, videos of it. Like I've
Yeah.
never like, actually witnessed it in church, thank goodness. But
No.
like that would have scared the hell out of me because
Yeah.
I mean, I don't consider myself having a snake phobia, but like I'd rather not, right?
Yeah.
So
Well, yeah. A python's
yeah,
one thing. A rattlesnake, yeah, no.
yeah. I'm good on that.
No.
Yeah, I'm good on that. Yeah, especially like depending on and like they have a tendency to sometimes handle like poisonous things like rattlesnakes, as you mentioned, and like
Yeah.
I
Oh,
like
yeah.
whole time like now the only thing I think of is Kent Hovind, right? Like that's all I
No.
think about when he got
Yeah.
bit by this snakes that happened to like come on his property with Dino Land and all this other stuff. But that's what
And I know it's in the Bible, and I know that that's their point, is that there's something in the Bible, and I can never remember the scripture where it's basically, it talks about taking up serpents and poison, and basically God would protect you. And I'm completely summarizing that and sort of bastardizing it, but that's the point of it, which I always think it's interesting though that you don't drink Drano. You'll take the serpent up, which has a decent chance of not biting you and killing you.
Right.
Drano will do the job immediately. So if you're really a believer, take a shot. Tell me how that gets out. But I've yet to be taken up on that challenge. So we'll see how that goes.
I seriously doubt anybody would, but and for good reason, obviously.
For good reason, because maybe handling serpents and drinking poison isn't all, you can't be protected by God, because Drano is pretty damn nasty.
Yeah. I mean, but like, I will definitely say that there was some reason that did come out of the pastor's mouth there, because like, I believe that one time he did bring up the whole snake handling thing.
Yeah.
And then he said to counterman, he's like, yes, I understand that the Bible does say that you can take up serpents and they won't harm you, etc.
Right.
But, the Bible also says you shall not tempt thy Lord, thy God.
There you go.
Yeah,
There's a little bit of conflict there, isn't there?
Yeah, exactly. So like, I can understand like if you're camping in the woods and if you got to go ahead and get rid of the snakes, so because they're going to go ahead and bite you and also your party that you're with, that's one thing. But actually like bringing them into, thank you, Mark 16:18, actually bringing them into like your, domicile where you're doing your worship service, like that's weird.
That's funny. Yeah. Thank you. I think MJ was our producer. She found that real quick. She's good at that kind of stuff. That's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody else had a question here, and these names because I'm like Libertad, and the other person you said was Arthur or something. I don't know if you knew Libertad.
Oh no, Titus. No, I am not familiar with Libertad, but thank you for joining. Myself, I was adopted into what was an atheist family. My birth mother insisted I be raised in the Church of England, so my sister and I attended Sunday school for years, etc., and went to Krishna.
Nice. Oh wow,
interesting.
That is interesting.
That is interesting.
That's a wild mix.
Yeah, it is.
Libra, do I know you? Are you? Because Krishna is. What is Krishna usually from? Is that specifically to any region?
That sounds like Hinduism.
I see. That's what I'm guessing, because like Hare Krishna, but and they said Church of England, specifically Church of England. We don't really say Church of England in the United States, right?
Right. We usually say like Episcopal is basically the American sister to
exactly.
The
That's
Church.
what I always think of it as well. So I'm wondering if this is if this person's Indian through in India in England, perhaps,
Oh, Hindu,
yeah,
yes.
Libertad.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
It's a Hindu.
Yeah, they thank you, Libertad. That
Thank
actually,
you, like, clearing that up.
Yeah, it was kind of funny, Michael. So not to jump like.
That's okay. We can jump wherever you want to jump.
Okay, no, I was just reminded, like, I was talking to my mom yesterday, and she was telling, and I was telling you that we did a debate yesterday, when with Black Nonbelievers between an atheist and a theist, and the atheist brought up that Hinduism is the oldest religion in the world, and my mom was in the audience, and when we were driving back, she's like, I didn't think that was true. I said, no, it's true.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, it is. She said even predates Kemetic. I was like, yes, I said it definitely predates like Egyptian Kemetic religion. And I said, I don't think that like people really realize how old the Indian culture really is. It's very
You're right.
Very old.
It's very, very old. It was very well established. Yeah, we were we were nothing over here, or we were living in caves, and they had
Right.
full on society. Yes,
Yeah.
this is a problem with Americans. You know,
Yes.
as you and I both Americans, we have a
Right.
tendency to think that America was the first thing that ever started in this world. Right?
Correct. Yes,
And
exactly.
you know,
Right.
the
Thank
Libra
you,
saying at least
Libertad.
5,000 5,000 BC.
Yeah, exactly.
5,000
Yeah.
BC, we were running around trying to ride a woolly mammoth here in this country.
Precisely. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's
Yeah.
what's like no, like the Indian culture is like extremely old. Hinduism is extremely old. You know, like I don't know if you ever got a chance to go to the Art Institute of Chicago
Yeah, I was just there
downtown.
2 weeks ago, in fact.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, we were just there like 2 weekends, last weekend, in fact. Yeah.
Oh, nice. Well, they have art from
Yeah.
that time period, you know,
Yes.
in the
Yeah.
in the and I mean like, and it was like so cool, it's so fascinating to see how they depicted their gods, because a lot of times that they depicted their gods when they would make them anatomically, you know, I don't want to
Mhm.
say correct, but they would, you know, they would like express them anatomically.
Yeah.
And like a lot of their gods had both, I guess, like male and female
Female genitalia. Yeah.
genitalia, you know?
Right.
Yeah. So like, and it's like, I remember this, you know, talking to another person who was with me at the time when we were like observing this. It was like, so like this whole demonization against trans people is just so made up. It is so,
Yeah.
and it is so like, you know, like propagandized in order for,
Mhm.
you know, for us to be able to look at these people and think that they're like not something that should be like existing, but they existed for like multiple millennia, right?
Multiple millennia. Yes.
Multiple
And
millennia.
for the most part, no one cared. I mean, you know, I say no, I was around 5,000 years ago, but the fact that it is depicted over and over and over again through all the world
Mm-hmm.
tells you, and people, you know, in those days, and in those days sounds like in the old days, but you crafted statues and art and things of that you wanted people to know.
Right.
You know, this wasn't something you were hiding, or you wouldn't make a statue of it, right? This was
Right.
depicted for a reason.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, any one of us can grab a piece of paper and a pencil and crank out whatever we want. Back then, you're talking about chiseling stuff out of rock. You're not chiseling something out of rock that you don't want people to know and see. So it was
Right.
held up, and it is. It's a different world that you and I have lived in, and this recent culture. And recent is a relative term, but yeah, the propaganda. I think
Recent,
you used that word. That's true. It's
yeah,
propaganda.
recent compared to like, you know, the rest of the
5,000
world,
BC.
right? Yeah,
Yeah.
because like what is
7,000
America's
years
like,
ago.
United States is like only like what, 250 years
200,
old?
we're coming up on 250. Yeah.
Yeah,
Next
exactly.
year,
So
250. Yeah.
yeah, so like we're a very pretty young country compared to the rest of the civilized. Well,
Yeah.
I'm not going to say civilized. I'm going to say compared to the more industrial countries that we can
Absolutely.
compare
For
ourselves to.
sure.
Yeah.
So let's jump back, and we're jumping all, and that's fine. I don't mind jumping. I want to make sure that we also get
Yeah,
some of your other
I get
information
all
out.
ADHD when I have these things, but yeah, we can go
No,
ahead and
that's
jump
okay.
back.
Because when people ask a question, I do not mind jumping sideways and answering, because that's the point.
Yeah.
I want people to see themselves in you or other guests that I have, because that's exactly my point. I want some guy in Duluth who's, you know, he's black, maybe he's in Southern Baptist Church, and he's not believing, but he's tied into everything as you were and other people were. And I want him to see you and like, okay, I'm not the only one.
Right.
I can get out, you know, if I need
Right.
to.
Yeah,
But let's talk.
exactly.
Let's take you back a little bit.
Mhm.
To you were in college, you were still feeling, you know, religious, and you made a good point. You know, we don't do much in the Episcopal Church, so it's not a super exciting service. But then you go to a black church, the traditional stereotype of a black church, where it's much more enthusiastic and animated and singing and the music. How could you not like that? That is really, and I know you're in the, what is it, the Godless gospel? Is that what it is now?
I am. Yes.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
you're a musical person. You studied music, so it's right up your alley. But at some point, despite all that, the entertainment and performative part of it, the intellectual part of it, obviously started to get to you. So tell me about
It
that.
did.
When did that start to kick in, or what
Yeah.
was the impetus for that?
Yeah. Okay. So I was constantly being told by the ministers, the elders, and even like the pastor and the pastor's wife, who was also like, you know, the who was also an ordained minister, that I had a calling on my life, right?
Ah,
So
you.
yeah, yeah. Ooh, well. So so I was encouraged to join a ministerial class
Mm-hmm.
that they were going to have people join in order for them to become like a minister and be like the intro to like, moving up in like the leadership ranks when it came to ordination, right? So I was like, okay. So I joined, and I enjoyed it because I liked to learn. I liked to study, I liked to research, I liked to find out different things that I didn't know. But one of the things that happened is that I started to dive into the Bible and coming across the more problematic, scriptures.
Mm-hmm.
And often they would be part of our lesson plans that we were supposed to study that particular week before we actually had a class the following
Oh.
week. So, of course, I'm reading this, I'm studying this. I find out this is in the Bible, and I'm just like shocked and floored. Especially like I think that the one that really bothered me the most was in Leviticus, I want to say 25, when there was like a whole scripture about how to organize and treat slaves.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I'm reading this and being like a person, a student of history, of knowing about how like chattel slavery operated in the United States. It looks like, very similar. And of course, like then, you look into other sources that talks about how biblical teaching was utilized in order to justify slavery in the
Yeah.
United States, to justify the transatlantic slave trade, later finding out that it was a papal bull from the Pope in the Roman Catholic Church in the, I want to say like the early 1500s that basically blessed the continuance and utilization of the transatlantic slave trade.
Mm-hmm.
And how you had like religious institutions and also universities that owned slaves that used the same scriptures in order for them to basically say that, well, it seemed like God was okay with it, so we should be too. And so I had questions.
Yeah, I bet.
And I would definitely say, depending on the church, I can't speak for every church,
Mm-hmm.
but from the conversations that I had from other people who came out of Christianity, especially the more charismatic faiths,
Mm-hmm.
that critical thinking, skepticism, and questioning are not encouraged in church.
Yeah, I agree.
So when I would come to my teacher and say, hey, I ran across this and I have questions about this, and I'm just going off and going off and going off, just asking question after question, follow up after follow up, because the answers that I were getting were just not satisfactory to me because they made no sense. It just seems like that they were just like surface level
Yeah.
instead of just getting into the meat and potatoes of what I'm actually asking, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm basically asking myself, why would such a benevolent God allow a whole structure in his holy word to be
Mm-hmm.
set up on controlling another human being whom supposedly he says he loves?
Right.
And then also, how could a benevolent God also allow such a horrible institution to exist
Mm-hmm.
to African Americans in order to enslave them? Even though I understand that even with the inception of the United States, not every Black person was enslaved, but
Sure.
the
But
vast majority of them
yes.
were.
Yeah.
And you still had laws to govern whether if you were Black versus whether if you were white, what you could access and what you couldn't access, even before slavery was abolished.
Yeah.
And we know also through history that freed Blacks were sometimes captured and sold back into slavery. That's what 12 years a slave was all about.
Yeah.
That person was a freed Black man who was, captured and sold illegally back into the institution of chattel slavery. So I'm like, I don't understand, like, if God is all loving, all knowing, all seeing, omniscient, all powerful, why would he allow this to happen, especially for people who are supposedly devoted to him? Because I was taught, even when I was in Catholic school, it was predominant, like my parochial school from K through 8th grade was predominantly Black. And we had majority Black teachers who would teach some of this history. And I'm trying to reconcile how this could happen to people who supposedly believed in them, and then also sit with rhetoric like, well, Black people were allowed to be sold and born and die in slavery in order for them to learn about Christianity. And I'm like, but God is all powerful and all knowing. How can he just like download the information in your head so that,
Right.
you're Christian? You're like, oh, I believe now because God, like, put in a USB port really quickly in the back of my medulla oblongata and, gave me the info, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I
So,
wouldn't, it's funny you say it because I've always thought the same thing. When people talk about the grand scheme of human beings, we talk about it in the understanding that we have of human beings now. But if you and I were to sit down and a piece of paper and say, let's design a being that will worship us forever, we would not put any of these flaws in. We would make them not need food, not need heat, not all these things that people say, well, because of this, that's why it's so perfect. We're perfectly situated in the universe. We have just the right amount of heat. Not for my design. My machine would be impervious to cold and heat. My machine would not need food. It would not need to eat animals. It would not need this, that, and the other. And I would not give it free will because what's the point? I'm asking it to worship me.
right.
So but we justify the human experience to go back to a God. But at the same time, like, I wouldn't design anything to do all these things that and you and I were talking before the meeting, that you have glasses on. I wear glasses as well. I wouldn't design that either because that's a really bad design. I would make eyes probably.
Eyes are terrible.
And they'd last forever.
They're terrible. They're horrible.
They wouldn't need to procreate, nothing, because I put in a million of them on this planet I just built, and they'd all just run forever, right? I just wind them up and let them go.
Right.
But yeah, you're right. Now, let me ask you a question, because this is fascinating to me. You're asking this of these religious leaders and scholar leaders, and they're predominantly Black. I'm assuming the ones that you're really asking, because you're asking within the community, say, okay, as a Black person to a Black person, how can you, as a religious person, be okay with this slavery thing?
Right.
And I've always wondered this, and I'm so happy to have you, because it makes no sense to me as a white person, and I'm not naive to how things work, but that has to be one of the first questions I think I would have. It's like, this book, as you well said, is held up, and especially during the slave era and even up to the civil rights era and today, saying it's in the Bible that we should be segregated back in the 60s. It's in the Bible.
Yeah.
And you go across town to the Black church, it's the same Bible.
Yeah.
What was the logic when they said yes, but? Because I'm sure there was a but.
Oh, yeah.
How'd they get around that? What was their actual reasoning?
It was a lot of obfuscating to cherry picking. That's the best way that I can put it. Because, like, when you ask these very pertinent questions, because, like, I did the same thing when we were at the debate yesterday. I was talking to the pastor's wife, and I brought up the scriptures that can be contradictory, right?
Mm-hmm.
And also how our position as African Americans does not fare with our belief,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I brought up to her, I was like, you remember when I was talking about this at the American Humanist
Humanist, yeah.
Association, like when I brought up the statistics when it came to wealth share alone. I was like, wealth share in this country now is 3.4% for African Americans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, it's less than 4%. Versus like 95, 96% in, predominantly, Caucasian hands.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And we can point back to specific laws that were practiced in the United States that kept it that way. So this wealth, this chasm that we're even sharing when it comes to wealth ownership was completely made. It was completely human made. It was not something that just happened naturally, right?
Right.
And I'm like, so how can we rectify as a people, God standing by? Come in, honey. Sorry, my son is calling me.
That's all right.
Who is turn the door, honey.
He's little, right?
Yeah, he's 4.
Okay.
Yeah, turn the knob, honey. There you go. All right.
Can I watch SpongeBob on the TV?
You can watch it in the living room. Mommy's doing a podcast right now.
Come on, sweetie. We can go watch SpongeBob.
Yeah, go watch SpongeBob in the living room, honey.
Can I also have a lightning cable to charge the tablet?
Yes, you can. This right here. Sorry, people. I'm a real person with real life.
She's a real person.
Let me see.
I deal with real life. You want to come on? You want to?
Yeah, let's say hi.
Say hi.
Hi, buddy.
Yes. Say,
How you doing, man?
You want to tell people your name?
Yeah.
What's your name?
My name.
What's your name?
Rob Honor.
Say it louder.
Rob Honor.
Rob Honor?
Yeah.
That's who you are?
Yeah.
Say hi, people. My name is Rob Honor.
Hi, people.
Hey, Rob Honor.
My name is Rob Honor.
Yes. And we are on the Atheistville show. Yeah. Okay. So do you want to watch SpongeBob now? You want to go watch SpongeBob? Go watch SpongeBob, honey.
Right?
You want to stay with mommy and be on the podcast?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Cool. All right.
Oh.
Guys, my son is going to join us for a while, until he gets bored.
Yeah, until he gets bored.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Everybody say, yes, wave to the people. The show has become like way more interesting now that he's on the show.
Oh yeah, now he can see himself.
Okay, so since I was asked a bunch of questions and now he's on, I need for you to ask the question that you were asking me before, so I can.
That's why I'm going to jump to a question or a comment because it's what we were talking about. Critical Christian, I have it on the screen there. The ancient Israelite slavery wasn't the same as 17th century slavery, and there's a whole chat going on in the things in the comments between different people. But I've heard this before, and I don't know that I care in the sense that you're saying from your perspective, black slavery. I'm thinking slavery in general doesn't
exactly. I'm thinking about slavery in general. Because when it came to,
I need my headphones.
You need headphones too. I got headphones. I'll put some headphones on you too, so you can have something on your head too as well. Okay. You want to put these headphones on?
But they were too small.
But they're too small? There's the only those headphones I got. You want these big headphones? You want these?
Yeah.
Okay. We can put the big headphones on for you. They're not plugged into the computer. They're just on there. Okay. Okay. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Now you look like a podcaster. Okay.
There you go.
Yeah, I don't care either. Because for the simple fact of the matter is that regardless, if slavery that was described, and especially how it was organized in the Bible versus slavery that was like practiced in the States.
Mhm.
And also in the Caribbean, in Central America, in South America, it doesn't matter, because
Yeah, I mean,
it still
Egyptians.
gave. Yeah, Egyptians had slaves,
Yeah, it's a
like
human
Babylonians
thing.
have slaves, right? Yeah, it's but
People
regardless,
do that.
yeah, people do that. I mean, but the question to me is not, was it the same? The question is it right?
That's
Right?
that to me is exactly it. That seems like the very
Yeah.
bottom line. And your question now, you were asking a Black scholar or a Black religious leader because of the Black experience, but the
Right.
same question, you remove the Black, and it's the same question. Like, how is a book that allows slavery good? How is a deity, regardless of what God you're praying to, but if there's a God that you think controls and loves, how is slavery at all within the bounds of possibility? And if they can stop various things from happening, why wouldn't they put a stop to that? And I can never quite understand any justification. I understand what maybe Critical Christian is saying, where there are different times, but those are the different human times. Yes, we may have allowed slavery as humans, and we now see that it's bad.
Right.
But we're humans. We're flawed by general nature. God is supposed to be above all this and said, no, this was wrong to begin with, guys. Stop it. I'm going to put a stop to it right now. I'm going to flood something if you guys don't stop it.
Exactly. Right? I mean, like, especially like if you even look at like the New Testament, where like, Jesus says like, who the Son sets free is free indeed. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And even Paul said there's neither, bond nor free, Jew nor Greek, male nor female. We are all one in Jesus Christ. Like, so I'm thinking to myself, like, if we're looking at the scriptures, and it seems like that there was an emphasis on being free because, the Messiah has come to free us from the bondage of sin. Yeah. Why would this not translate also to the, how we live as a people as well? And especially, and I mean, like, and even if we like, fast forward today, right now in 2025, slavery is still practiced.
Yeah, exactly.
It's still practiced. I mean, like, even though that we don't necessarily have like the institution of slavery where you have like, a majority of a population that's actually picking cotton,
right,
and dyeing cloth in indigo. It does not mean, honey, chill out for a second. Thank you. It doesn't necessarily mean that, people are not being like, oppressed and suppressed and also being controlled in institutions that are making them do things that are outside of their, of their own will and autonomy.
Right.
And so, like, again, it forces us to really, ask this question and really come up with like, so what's the answer to this when it comes to why, if God is so like, caring and benevolent and all these different things, why would, this God allow an institution like this to exist in the first place in humanity? Why?
I agree. It's baffling. And again, there's a whole conversation going in the comments, which I love. And again, Christian, what was your name again? Critical Christian. Thank you for putting this in there. I don't think I said at the beginning of this, but I try to make a point. I'm gonna make it now for everybody that is listening. We're not here to bash people, because majority, probably like you, Cynthia, most of the people I love in this world and have ever loved are Christians.
Sure.
So I'm not here to bash them or bash their beliefs per se. We obviously have questions with it, and we have disagreements. Right. But I'm not here to insult you intentionally. You're going to be insulted and feel offended because just the conversation sometimes, but that's not the intention. So Critical Christian, when you put your comments in there, I'm reading them. I'm not necessarily posting them all just for flow of conversation, but I am reading them, and I do appreciate you putting them in there and being civil. As long as people are civil, we're happy to have, Cynthia and I are both happy to have these conversations, because it's very important, and we may never agree, but it's good that we have them. So again, thank you.
Exactly. Even when we were doing the debate yesterday, I said, like, we do not engage personalities, right?
Yeah.
But we do, we do disagree with ideas, right?
Exactly. It's an idea. And you may take it very personally, but it's still an idea nonetheless. I'm not saying you, the individual,
right?
I'm saying the idea I disagree with.
Right, exactly. You
I
know,
need
like,
to find another house.
okay, you gonna find another house? You wanna go to the living room and find a house?
Yeah.
You gonna go to the living room and find another house?
Mommy, that's not your house. That's
Oh,
not your living
that's not
room.
my house?
That's
Okay.
not
Okay,
your
that's
living room.
cool. I don't know.
Not.
Let's go find your house.
So I'm going to jump you up a little bit. So
Yeah, go jump me up, because like he's gonna
So-
take over the whole conversation very quickly.
that's right. So yeah, exactly. To get derailed with kids, right?
Yeah.
So we touched on this earlier because it was something that came up in my first meeting with your group,
Mhm.
that leaving the church, and specifically a Black church and the Black community,
Yeah.
how did that feel? Did you feel isolated because of that? As someone again said in your group, it was questioning your Blackness.
Yeah, that is definitely a thing. Now, I would say, me specifically, I did not get as much of the isolation aspect of it. And I think
Mhm.
part of it is because when I left, I was older, and also my family was not
My family.
exactly. My family was not like, dogmatic in that
Okay.
way, right?
Okay, so good. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, like, how Episcopals roll. They're Christian light, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
It's more so like, hey, mom was one, grandma was one, grandpa was one, etc., etc.
Mhm.
So that's
Right.
how it is. So like, I was not like alienated. I was not like, excommunicated or anything
Okay.
like that,
Well,
because
kicked
like
out
I'm
of the
like,
family.
yeah.
disinvited
That
from
didn't happen
everything.
to me.
Good.
But
Good.
I know people
Too
who.
bright. Too bright.
Okay, well, don't look at it, honey. Don't look at it.
It's too bright.
Well, don't look at it. But I do know like people who were in more stricter, even though I should say more stricter, who were in stricter environments,
Yeah.
who ended up like, coming out and say, yeah, I'm atheist. I can't really rectify belief any longer, etc. And then, they decided to leave, and they still don't have like any type of communication, or they have like a very bad communication with their family. Matter of fact, I just started a new job this week.
Oh, congratulations.
And thank you. And I was meeting with one of the people who were training me, and we all had lunch, me and another young lady and another young man. And he told us that because he's queer,
Mhm.
his family no longer deals with him
Yeah.
because of their religion.
Yeah.
And I thought, because like, I think that like one of my colleagues asked, because he said that he was originally from Texas, but he's in Chicago now. Do you go back to Texas often to go see your family? And he said no, and then that's the reason why.
Yeah.
And I found out so. And I mean, and this particular person that we were talking with was Latino,
Mhm.
which is like the second largest ethnicity in the United States. The United States that happens to be religious. African Americans are number one, but they're a close second, right? So it was sad to me to hear that, and I heard other people who happened to be Black that was still in the closet with their family because they knew that if they came out as atheist or agnostic or questioning or even a non, right, that says that, I may still believe, but I don't want to go to church anymore because I don't like the institution of religion, they would be excommunicated. They would be, treated as a pariah.
Yeah.
Because they no longer are within that purview. And I know that. And I think that part of this happens to be with our indoctrination and how religion, especially Christianity, has been placed in African Americans in the United States, that often our identity as a race has been linked to our identity, when it comes to belief.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, and even like yesterday, the pastor brought up, the organization of the civil rights movement meetings normally happening in churches.
In church, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But like, of course, like, since I wasn't one of the debaters, I wanted to tell him, I said, yeah, but like when it came to the network of churches that happened to be Black in the United States at the time, the majority of them did not support the civil rights movement. The majority of them did not.
Black churches.
Right. Black churches did not participate. A lot of them demonized Dr. King.
Really interesting. Okay.
Yes, they did. He was not. Matter of fact, if you were to poll Dr. King while he was alive versus now, like, of course, like a lot of people look at him as like, a very poignant like leader within that movement.
Sure. Yeah.
But at the same time, during the time that he was, doing his organizational and civil and social justice work, he was not popular at all. It's like, his polling would have been like right around 30%. And the reason being is because, like, if you were a participant and especially loud about your participation within the civil rights movement within the 50s and the 60s, you were targeted. I mean, like, yeah, you were targeted. I mean, like, today there is the Civil Rights Museum that's in Alabama. I want to say Birmingham, Alabama, is across the street from the 16th Street Baptist Church. That was bombed in the 50s because that was a meeting place of African Americans who happened to be part of the Southern Christian League, and also SNCC, and others who were supporting the civil rights movement. There was a movie called Four Little Girls.
Oh yeah.
And it was about
I know the story too of the four little girls. Yeah,
and it was about that specific church. They rebuilt it since then. It's still there, but it's across the street from the the museum I was telling you about. But because like churches and other and the Ku Klux Klan going to people's homes and throwing Molotov cocktails and burning crosses on their lawns and basically doing this whole area of violence towards people who happen to stand up against policies that were targeting African Americans at that time. I mean, like, a lot of churches would, speak out against, like, hey, basically you need to just go ahead and just like, put your head down and just like deal with what we're dealing with, and don't push the envelope. And, but like now, if you do talk to, especially like a lot of Black pastors and other, Black folk who happen, to be like Christian, they talk about like how like the church was like this like gleaming beacon, and all the churches were standing in solidarity together in order to exact change. And that's just not true. It's not. Yeah.
No, so that's actually really interesting. So you're not saying that they didn't necessarily agree with what he wanted to have happen. Like they weren't disagreeing with the ultimate consequences. Consequences is the wrong word. The ultimate change that he was looking for. But in that process, as we've seen throughout human history, nothing ever gets accomplished smoothly. There's usually a lot of struggle. And if you're alive during that struggle, it may be very bad for you. It's great for your grandchildren or great-grandchildren. They'll have a much better life. But if you're the one in the crosshairs, like the four little girls, all the various bombings and lynchings and all these sort of things, unfortunately, that has to happen. Is the sense of this is how humans work. That negative and bad and just horrible tragedy has to go on for the next group to come out of it somewhat unscathed, and it starts to weather it down where it's okay. It's not a problem now. But you're right. So I could see why. Yeah, you're right. Why? It's not like we want. I'm sure there's Black communities like we don't want this to continue, but at the same time, we don't want to get bombed.
Exactly.
So which is the lesser of the two evils?
Yeah, exactly.
I'd rather live today and live tomorrow, and my kids grow up alive.
Yeah.
Even though I hate what's going on. That's a terrible position to be in, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's kind of like, okay, I know this devil, right? It's the devil,
Is
you
that what you
know.
do? Yeah, right.
Yeah, and so I'm going to, move and work and behave in the way in order for me to be able to survive,
Yeah,
because this is the way of things. So
that's a good
I
point.
get it. I completely understand it,
I get it.
but it's ahistorical.
Yeah.
So like this whole thing about linking pride in one's race and ethnicity towards their belief systems,
Hmm.
I is fallacious as best. I don't and especially because this is not a popular sentiment amongst other races, but it is with African Americans and Black folk, especially now that we see since colonization
Hmm.
of and colonialism versus, specifically in the African continent,
Hmm.
and how, like, especially when it comes to like the evangelical ties,
Yeah.
that it has become so ingrained now into societies, even though you still have a very large Muslim population, and you still have like a population of people who happen to live live on the African continent, that may still, like, um adhere to some of their old ways that their ancestors did.
Hmm.
But you do have a large contingency of Christians that
Yeah.
have been introduced
Sure.
to this particular, like, prosperity doctrine,
Hmm.
liberation ministry work, or whatever. I would say in the past, like, 50 years, that has basically just taken off like a firework
Yeah.
in the continent. And it's interesting to see, because the more poor the area, the
Yeah.
higher their religious adherence, especially when it comes to Christianity, it is. And it so is in line with what's here, because when it comes to, like I said, poverty, wealth share, health, like all the statistics, all the social determinants of health that matter to human
Hmm.
beings, African Americans are on the bottom, except for our belief in God. And
Right. Yeah.
you would think that if we are at a 79 to 80% identifying, according to Pew Research, of Christianity, and you ask whatever you want in Jesus' name, and he will give it unto you, because, like, that's what the pastor's wife, I brought that up to her yesterday. But I said, Jesus said you can ask whatever you want in the name, and God will give it to you. And
Yeah.
she said, be it in his will. I said, so it's not the will for African Americans to prosper? Because according to the Bible, it also says that he said, brethren, I will it that ye prosper as your soul prospers. So
Mm.
as your belief system becomes more deepened and rooted, the natural prosperity should match. But a lot of times we are looking at how it's showing up in reality,
Yeah.
and what is being preached versus what is being seen are two different things.
I agree. Yeah. And Larry just sort of seconds your point.
Mhm.
The religious prey on people that are in their lowest and most desperate state. And
That's
it,
right.
and part of it I understand. I was talking to someone not too long ago. Oh, because we're talking about this the flood in Texas, and
Mhm.
how people will in times of grief they will lean into their belief, which I've always been like, I'm going to give you a total pass if that's what helps you get up tomorrow morning because your family has died, whatever it takes. It doesn't matter. I mean, I don't really care anyways, but if that's what it takes, fine. But at
Mhm.
the same time, the more insidious part of that is when people are at their lowest, someone comes in there to sort of insert religion where there was none before. And you could argue that they genuinely think they're doing good, but it's like, I always kind of like, if that's the person you have to get, is the person who's at their wit's end, at their lowest point, at their most desperate, and they're grasping for any straw. You know, is it really valuable, or are you just taking advantage of people as a manipulation?
Right.
You know, we would probably argue one side versus others, but it's a very common thing. And like you said, poor communities all over the world are usually very religious, very religious, far more than others. And I'm sure there's a lot of different pieces and parts of that. Obviously, education is less in poor areas than it is in more wealthy areas, right?
Yeah.
And as education, you get further away from that. The more educated, the less religious you go.
Right.
Correlation doesn't always equal causation, but there's definitely some things there that make sense, right?
Exactly.
So let me ask you. So I know you came out. I'm gonna use that term because it's what we kind of say. You came out much later, right? In your 30s or so, 40s. When
I was 41 when I came out.
41. So did you have? And we talked about your family wasn't really a big concern, but as a general, were there any general consequences that you felt, not just as a Black person, but as a person in general? Did you run into that? And you grew up here. You lived here in Chicago.
Yeah.
A little different than if you were in Birmingham.
Sure.
Were there any consequences that you felt?
I would say like I'm not going to say that there weren't any consequences. I think that like the consequences that came to me were inconsequential. Put it that way. And because like I did have like if a person, let's say, found out that I was not a Christian, there were questions. I remember specifically when I first started in the health field, especially in social work, after I got my certification, I took a temporary position with a company, and before I actually started working with the first one that I really, set me on the path to doing like real social work, within the community. Yeah. And I remember that I was asked if I can come in to make up hours on a Saturday. And they said that, one of the other people who were more, who had more seniority because they were there longer was going to work with me. And I was like, yeah, that's cool. That's fine. So I came in that Saturday, and the young lady overheard my conversation that I had with our supervisor at that time, who knew I was not Christian, right? I think it just came up in passing. Yeah. But like it wasn't like anything that I pushed. It was just like, bye, right? Yeah. Sure. So she heard, because like I think I was asking my supervisor about a book that she was reading. She said, "Oh, you wouldn't be interested in that." And I said, "Well, what's the book?" And she said, "Oh, it's Joyce Meyer, Battlefield of the Mind," or something like that. I was like, "Oh yeah, I know who Joyce Meyer is. I'm familiar with that book. I read it. You know, it's not a bad book. I think that like there's some points in there that could be, that human beings could actually, apply, right? Yeah, sure. But I just don't agree with the whole like the religious portion of it, right? Yeah. But but as far as like if you're talking about some ways of like mindfulness, I'm all for that. That's fine. So she heard me and her talk about that. So she's like, "Oh, wait a minute, Cynthia's not a Christian? What is this? Oh dear." So when we got to the our workplace that we were doing that Saturday, and I was asking her questions about what specifically needs to be done that day that we will need to catch up on. That was completely ignored. And then all of a sudden I started being like bombarded with all these questions about why you're not a Christian. Why are you not a Jesus believer? Why don't you go to church? Why aren't you, bathe in the blood of Jesus Christ and believe in the resurrection and all these different things. And and I was like, I just wanted to know how to enter these portfolios in the the medical record system. Right. Like I mean, like as far as like philosophical questions about religion and faith and things, I was not expecting to answer. Yeah. And she said, "Well, I'm just curious because like I heard you talking to such and such the other day, blah blah blah." And I was like, yeah, like, we had a conversation amongst ourselves, and then you just overheard it, but
Yeah.
okay. And and I was clearly trying to communicate to this woman that I am uncomfortable and I do not want to answer her questions because I did not feel like it was appropriate, and I really felt like I was being attacked.
So that I was going to
And
ask you that it was accusational, not just curious.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
Like the way that she was like, why aren't you a Christian?
Yeah.
Why don't
What's
you?
wrong with you?
What's right? Exactly. It was a whole wrong with you, like type of thing. Like, you're portraying, that you are betraying your blackness now that because you're not a Christian. You know that, right? And I'm
Yeah.
like, I am? Who knew?
Didn't realize that.
I did not know this. Is this written somewhere? Do I need to get, like a scroll that says this? Whatever. And so we had the conversation. I was like, okay, I'm just going to have to answer this person's question. So hopefully she will leave me alone. and I tell you, the more that she asked questions, the more angry that she got with me.
Really?
Yeah.
It's a coworker. I mean,
yeah,
not in like 1950. This is
yeah.
modern days. I mean,
yeah.
we don't say that sort of stuff at work. We know better nowadays not to discuss this.
Yeah.
She was black, you said, or no?
Yes. Yeah, she was a black lady.
Was it just between us black people? Kind of like, because, as a white person, you get some people that say stuff, you're like, why on earth do you think I would be the guy to talk to you about that? But it's like, what's between us white guys? Like, no, that's doesn't qualify every conversation to be had.
Right.
You think she was comfortable asking you that and saying this to you because she was also black, where another person of a different race probably wouldn't have had that deep of a conversation? Or do you think she's just one of these people that's oblivious to the etiquette of the workplace?
No, she was very, very much so dedicated to her religious practice. She kept a very large version of the Bible on her desk that she would read every day. And so like everybody knew that she was the holy roller in the office, right?
Okay.
So
that type.
Yeah. But that day, of course, it's just her and I that's working together.
Lucky you.
Oh, I know, right? The luckiest in the world at that time. and of course, she felt comfortable asking these questions of me, even though she barely knew me.
Yeah.
Because you're a black lady, I'm a black lady. We can talk about this, right? And I'm like, no, let's not. But she did, and I was just like, oh my God, I'm so uncomfortable right now. I don't want to have this conversation with her because and the thing about it is that I was her.
Yeah, you were. You've been down that road.
I was her. I had those same belief systems. I had that same ideology. I spoke that same rhetoric. So I knew the stuff that was going to come out of her mouth before I even said it. And I remember some of the people who I've accosted in the past that I'm still like, in relationship with. I went back to apologize to them.
Did you?
I did. I said, I'm so sorry. Because I put you on the spot, based on my convictions instead of like how you decide to live your life. And that was not right. And for that, I have to say, I'm so sorry, and so like, I'm like, well, damn, I guess this is karma now. Right. Because like, I've done this. I had the same type of conversations with people in the past. And so like, of course, like, when she was asking me these questions, like I knew how to answer. Right.
Yeah, right. You knew.
Right. I said, you're going to say this, but the reality is this, right?
Yeah.
And the more that I'm engaging her, the angrier she gets, right?
Oh yeah.
And I think, and the reason being is because like when you and I say that we're atheists, it's just a position. It's not like, something that completely identifies everything that we do, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a position. I don't believe in God. Moving on.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, but when people are like Christian, especially when they are dedicated to their religious beliefs, it becomes everything that they are. So when you are in disagreement with specifically their worldview, it's a problem. And
Yeah.
and I know that, like, you know, she got bass in her voice and everything, Michael, when I'm talking to this lady. And so, you know, and so I'm trying to, like, you know, make it light. I'm trying to get out of the conversation. And then she says, you know, I would love for you to talk to my pastor. And
Oh
I was
boy.
like, the last thing I want to do is talk to your pastor.
Right.
But if you want to give me his number, cool, give it to me, right?
Yeah.
And if it will stop this line of questioning,
Yeah.
I am willing to do whatever the hell you want me to do in
Right.
order for us to stop
To
engaging
get
each other in
back
this
to
manner.
work.
Yes. Yes. Take the number. Now, can you
Yeah.
please show me how to enter these charts
Yeah,
into
right.
the electronic medical record system that we are using right now?
That's
Please and
funny.
thank you. You know,
So let me ask you another question, because it piggybacks right off of that, because she
Yeah.
went into it as soon as she overheard that previous conversation with you and your other colleague. She knows she made some assumptions right from the
Yes.
get-go. And the more you
Yes.
talked and answered her, she made more assumptions. So tell me about some of the myths or misconceptions that you think that people have. It may be, again, and I wrote it this way for as a Black atheist, because it's, again, maybe different than people have of me. But
Mhm.
what are some of those myths and misconceptions that you've heard that you would maybe take a moment to dispel as best
Yeah.
you can? You know, no one's gonna believe you, but you know, at least we'll hear what you have to say.
Yeah. Well, I think that, like, one of the main things that comes up, and I mean, like, I'm pretty sure that Titus can also chime in the chat on this one
Yeah,
too.
jump in, Titus.
Yeah. That if you happen to be a Black atheist, then you're leaning on to something that's considered white.
Yeah.
You know, you're like aligning yourself with white point of views, and white thought, and whatever that means, right? Instead of
Right.
just saying that, hey, I do not believe because I do not have any good reason to believe that God
Mm-hmm.
exists.
Yeah.
Therefore, I'm an atheist, right? And you know, when I'm engaging with other folk who are believers,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm bringing up, like, some of the issues concerning their beliefs, and where, like, somebody like you and I would sit, as far as, like, you know, what kind of brought us to this position in our lives,
Mm-hmm.
it starts to become an argument from anecdote and personal point of view.
Yeah.
And then so I'm like, I say, yeah, I get that, and I understand that this is a personal thing, and it depended on your relationship, whatever the hell that means. I get that.
Mm-hmm.
I use the same talking points, lady. I know this.
Right.
But what I'm asking you for is evidence, empirical evidence, tangible evidence, hard-line
Mm-hmm.
evidence.
Yeah.
You know, and if you're unable to produce that, then unfortunately, the only thing that's going to happen is this is going to be a circular argument, and you're going to be repeating some of the same talking points that you're going to have in order for you to justify your belief.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the thing. I am not criticizing you specifically for believing.
Yeah. Yes.
I'm not, because
Mhm.
I understand why you do, because I was you. Okay. I've been down this road. What I am criticizing is the belief itself.
Yeah.
And the thing that is happening is, when I'm criticizing the belief, you're taking it personal because you allowed this belief to be your identity, who you are. It dictates everything you do. It dictates your decisions.
Mm-hmm.
It dictates who you marry. It dictates
Everything.
how many children that you have. It dictates what type of line of work that you do. It
Yeah.
dictates the clothing that you wear, how you present yourself in the world.
Yeah.
That's what this belief system does.
Yeah.
And I mean, cool if that's something that you want to do,
Mm-hmm.
because you're a grown person and you consented to do that. But it's not right for you or any person of your ilk to push that same point of view, behavior, belief on me, because I'm a grown person too. I have a brain. I am a sentient being. I have the ability to make the decisions that I feel that is best for me.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think people do misunderstand it, and I'm sure we're all guilty of sometimes blurring that line as well. But you're absolutely right. I try to remember, but I don't always do a good job of it. But I don't disagree with you as the person. I disagree with the idea. And like you said, but if you're so ingrained, and people are going to look at us and say, well, here on a podcast talking about atheism, aren't we? You know, I would say no, but I get why people might say we're just as ingrained as religious people. But I can tell you, I do this, you know, an hour or so a week. That's about it. Everything else in my day, it does nothing to do with atheism or God or anything other thing. It's just something I do as a hobby because I think it's important. But as soon as we hang up from this thing, I'll go watch TV with my wife and I'll get something to drink. And then I'll go to sleep and I'll go up to work tomorrow. And I won't think anything of it until I go to edit. And I'll do it. But again, that's editing. I don't think about it.
Exactly.
Like you said, I won't put on certain clothes because of my atheism. I won't not marry my wife because of atheism, or I won't hang out with that person because they're a believer or not. Because as I said earlier, most of the people I've ever loved and will ever love are probably going to be Christian. And some of them are, my mom is a very hardcore Christian. Okay. It doesn't mean I don't love her. You know, I mean, my brother is a Christian. His whole family is a Christian. Okay. That's fine. It doesn't dissuade me from hanging out with people or talking to people. Yeah. It can lead to some interesting conversations.
Mike, let me tell you something. Except for this morning, because like my mom didn't feel like going, but I take my mother to church every Sunday.
That's fine.
Every Sunday. Yeah, that's because that's my mom.
It's a family thing.
That's what my family, that's exactly. And I mean, and there's been times where I've taken multiple family members to church when there was like special things that was going on, including my son. Now, if you ask me, did I stay? Absolutely not. But but I took them, like I said, I'm the one with the car in the house. I'm going to take them. Like if you ask me, can you take us to church? Absolutely. Come on. Like once I got him, I even got him ready, picked out his clothes, the whole 9 yards. So like, okay, honey, you're going to church with your aunties and your nana. And he was like, okay,
No, my son used to go to church with my mom all the time.
Yeah, all the time.
Right. Either for Christmas vacation or whatever, and like, it's fine. And he grew up actually more religious than my wife and myself, and our daughter is the oldest. He's actually more of a believer. I haven't talked to him in a while about the level of severity of that, but he definitely into his teens. He's 28 now, 29. But he was a believer. I was like, all right, you disagree with your dad. Okay. That would be the first time a son has disagreed with his dad.
Exactly.
But because he would go there and he enjoyed the experience. Okay. That's fine. I have no problem with that. I obviously don't love him less.
Exactly. And I kind of look at it as like, when I was 28, I was super Christian. I'm 48 now and I'm a hardcore heathen, so like, so like,
exactly.
Yeah, so like, things can change, people change, experiences can dictate like, your positions like as time goes on, and especially when you learn more and when you are exposed to more things, and when you kind of like, because like church, especially depending on the type of church you go to, can become an echo chamber. So it can. But when you get a chance to actually leave the echo chamber and be exposed to, other points of view, that may start to turn some knobs and some cogs in your head to make you start to seek out other things in order for you to, have like some of the big questions either answered or even like, addressed. Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
And which could totally, make you change your mind about where you are at that particular time.
Absolutely. And that's, of course, most of us all started that way. We had some question that just couldn't put it down.
Exactly.
And that led to another question. And there, bump, and then all of a sudden.
And then all of a sudden you're here.
A good question here. Do you see more people of color being able to deconvert? And what would be the driving force? And I think that's the second part of that question I really like. Do you think any driving force that might lead to that?
So this is the time, even though like last time that I checked the Pew Research, like you would have like Black folks specifically identify less than 1% as atheist.
Yeah.
But you do have roughly 29 to 30% of Black folks who say that they're not religious.
Okay.
Which is on par with the rest of the country.
Yeah, it is. You're right.
Yeah. So,
and that covers everything: atheist, agnostic, and just doesn't really want to commit.
Yeah, and I think that, like, you know, amongst those non-religious, there's probably people who are atheistic, but they may not necessarily be willing to, you know, to take on that moniker, right?
Yeah, I agree.
You know, for different reasons, but you know, regardless of that, but they consider themselves, they're not attached to a religious institution. They don't call themselves anything as far as like a religion is concerned. They may consider themselves spiritual. I've heard that a lot. I'm spiritual. I'm not religious or whatever.
Yeah.
Which is like, I'm like, I don't know what that is, but hey, do you? But but you know, but I really believe that the reason that you're having more and more people that is falling away from the church is because of knowledge. It's because that we know more about the natural world now than we did maybe 50, 60, 100 years ago, right?
Yeah.
And the more that we are learning about our natural world, and also being people who have experienced certain things within the church that have not been kosher, it's going to cause more people to rethink their position about belief. Yeah. You know, one of the other things that I mentioned to the other lady and other people who I've had these conversations with on why don't you believe? You know, I mentioned some of the treatment, especially that women received in church. Yeah. And even like me, you know, personally, what I have witnessed that really did not sit correctly with me. And then the notion of this whole topic about church hurt comes up. Yeah. And they say, oh, well, it's church hurt or whatever. And I've even seen this like in chat rooms and other different things like that, like, you know, blaming people who happen to be atheist, agnostic, non-religious, etc., who have left religion. Yeah. That, oh, that's because you experienced church hurt. But even if that is the only reason that they did, it's still a damn good reason for them to do so. And the reason being is because like people do not come to church on Sundays, on Tuesdays or Wednesdays, on Saturdays, or, you know, whenever they are volunteering to do in whatever type of ministry that they have volunteered to do, to experience hurt. They don't go there to be talked about, to be villainized, to be overlooked, to be, you know, rebuked, dressed down, all these other different things that I have seen on multiple occasions in church. Yeah. You know, they come, they go through enough through the week as it is. You know, I remember being yeah, I mean, I remember like, you know, being a college student and like, you know, being buried in research papers, and then on Sundays just given a chance for me just to be able to forget about that for a moment in time, right? You know, after graduation, actually getting like what I call a grown person's job, right? And then you are experiencing, you know, types of issues from your manager, and others that you are coworkers that you're interacting with who happen to be like the worst people ever in life. And come on, we all worked with people who you just want to just see not exist any longer. Let's keep it a buck, right? Yeah. So, you know, church is that time period where I can escape from all that. I can, you know, escape from that particular time in my life and just be able just to let my, you know, my hair down, let my time, you know, let myself get lost in worship or whatever, in order for me to just have some moments of bliss and peace and tranquility away from my life, right? Yeah. But if you are going to church for that, yet you are experiencing hardship in church too, I mean, wow. right?
What's the point?
What's the point? You
Yeah.
know, I mean, like, you know, and I mean, like, even like the Bible talks about being to, you know, come as you are, but people talk about you because you're overweight. They or come as you are, but people talk about like they don't like your outfit, or they don't like the way that you're wearing your hair, or they feel like they don't particularly care for the way that you talk, like you're talking too proper and you need to stop it, or what, you know, all types of crap that I've heard, you know, in church over the years. So
yeah,
I mean, like, you know, so like, and I'll tell you this one anecdote. When I was in church, I remember, because I was the choir director, I was also on doing like, you know, praise and worship. I was considered a leader in church, right? And I was also in ministerial class. And we were having a leadership meeting that we used to have once a month, every first Saturday of the month. And the pastor was doing his leadership, whatever. And then he decides to tell the person who happened to be the head of the dance ministry at the time that one of the young ladies that was participating in the dance ministry was too fat to dance. Now, mind you, at that particular time, I was like well over 300 pounds. I myself was well over 300 pounds. I am not any longer. I lost weight.
Yes,
but yeah, yay. But regardless of that, but you know, so, and I'm looking at myself, because like, you know, one of the things I was like I'm a musician, right? I play piano, I read music, I sing, all these other different things. I super get into what I do. Yeah. In my arms. And he's asleep in my arms right there. and so you know, I remember like it was times where like I remember the pastor telling, you know, anybody who actually directs choir that you had an entire area of the sanctuary that you can utilize in order for you to direct. You know, you had in the front of the pulpit, you had the aisle, you had the back of the church, whatever you want to do, just do it, right? Right. You ain't had to, that was the only thing that I needed for you to tell me to go ahead and let loose. Boy, I tell you, Mike, I was up and down that aisle. I would dance. I remember I would break down. I would do everything but twerk, because I can't twerk because I'm not, because I don't have a booty. But regardless of that, but you know, I would get down and people enjoyed it, right? And and again, like I said, I was well over 300, knocking on 400 pounds when I did this, right? Oh wow, yeah. So for me to hear the pastor, the same pastor who gave me permission that I can dance like David danced all over the church, but tell a young lady who's nowhere near that she can't dance in dance ministry because she was too fat, was infuriating. Oh, I can imagine. Plus, like, it's the irony of the one place you're supposed to be accepted for everything that you are, and they're still image conscious and this, that. I mean, you know, come on, that's just so silly. It is. It is. I'm like, you know, if this is supposed to be something that where come as you are, yeah, you know, be able to be who you are. You know, we are all one in Jesus Christ, blah, 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 whatever, you know, scripture euphemism that you want to bring up. But you say that. I mean, come on now. And I mean, like, and unfortunately, and I remember like my 7th grade religion and social studies and history teacher unfriended me on Facebook, Mike, because I put up a meme that said that there have been more children in church than at a drag show. Oh yeah. I can get into a hot butt on that because you're absolutely right. And it drives me insane because the numbers do not, first of all, the number of drag queens in the entire country is minimal. I mean, just minuscule. It's a tiny number regardless. The number of trans athletes is like, I looked this up not too long ago. They could fit in this room. The number of college trans athletes, despite all this talk we do. Then you want to add up all the people that have been abused by priests and pastors and blah, 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 blah. Yeah. We need a block long to fill. I mean, it's thousands and hundreds and thousands of people. Thousands, hundreds of thousands that have happened. It's not dozens. It's in the thousands and thousands and thousands. Because, but it's because it's in that group. I used to always joke, it's like if every Foot Locker manager was
was abusing their employees, and the Foot Locker upper management hide them and move them around, no one would go to Foot Locker. We would never buy anything there.
Yes,
It's
exactly.
religion. Yeah, okay, we'll overlook it, and I'll still go back to church tomorrow. Like, I can't get. Oh, I'm gonna go off a rant. I can't do that.
Yeah, I know, and
I
know that we're supposed to wrap up according to.
Yeah, we're gonna wrap up. It was such a great conversation. You and I could go for hours on this, but I'm sure because we've had a lot of good people chiming in and asking us questions. So, if people want to reach out to you, and we didn't get a chance to talk about the Black Nonbelievers, but you can plug that as well. Mm-hmm. Where could people reach you or find out more about you or more about the Black Nonbelievers group, not just Chicago, but the entire organization? I'd love to hear more.
Yeah. So, Black Nonbelievers, even though I'm the lead affiliate organizer in Chicago, it's headquartered in Atlanta and the president and founder is Mandisa Thomas. Mm-hmm. And our website is blacknonbelievers.org. Thank you, Larry. I appreciate that very much. And we are actually currently in our summer a fundraising drive. So if you go to our website at blacknonbelievers.org/donate, you can go ahead and donate to our work. We do a lot of work building community and also supporting community as well. All throughout the United States. I mean, it's not just like meetups, we do charitable work. We support, other organizations in some of the efforts that they do. We even do some lobbying as far as making sure that the institution of church and state are separate, Matter of fact, Mandy's and I were in Washington, D.C. meeting with representatives on the Hill, with the Secular Coalition of America that we've partnered with in order for this thing to happen. Wow. And also talking about other, policies that, specifically impact the Black community and also people who happen to be of marginalized groups. So we do great work. So please support us as much as possible.
Absolutely. And we'll put all this also in the show notes for the people who are watching. If you're watching this on, later after, on recording, what I'm looking for is you're watching it later. It's not live. But we'll put all this information in the show notes so you can link to that and find that as well, because she's doing some fantastic work.
Yeah. And I mean, and also too, I have a link tree. So please go to my link tree, Cam Glamming at Linktree. I'm also on the nonprofits. Matter of fact, nonprofits is on YouTube, and it's PROPHETS, not PROFITS, right? Exactly. So basically we are that's produced by the Atheist Community of Austin. I am a producer there. I pick a lot of the content, and we talk about, political and social issues, from a humanist atheist perspective. So, we premiere shows every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So, please subscribe to nonprofits and all that other great jazz. On Black Nonbelievers, we also have a YouTube, which is Black Nonbelievers, where we do In the Cut every first and third Saturday, where we are talking with members of the community about the work that they do to support humanism work, and also in their own capacity. Matter of fact, we recently had an author on, Dr. Brian Quoba, who wrote this book. If you can see, it's a book about Hubert Harrison. Okay. Hubert Harrison it's called Hubert Harrison, Forbidden Genius of Black Radicalism. Hubert Harrison was a Black socialist and atheist in Harlem at the turn of the century. He's originally from St. Croix. He did a lot of activism work in the Black community and also pushed forth humanistic and socialistic values, and also, was a staunch person against the church. And he wrote a whole anthology about him, and I'm in the book right now. The book is absolutely fantastic. Please go to Amazon and pick that up. It's he. Matter of fact, we hosted a talk about his book earlier this month. It was impromptu, but we had some people come out that also purchased his book as well, where he talked about his research and how that really inspired him to actually learn more about Hubert Harrison. He is definitely a Black secular figure that has been, in some cases, unless you're in this space, lost to time. He used to do these huge orations in Harlem, where they would get on these step ladders and they'll just start talking, basically, and thousands and thousands of people will come and gather around to listen to this man, basically pontificate, whatever musings happen to be on his mind. He was absolutely brilliant. Never went to university. He was what do you call it? Autodidactic. He was self-taught. And matter of fact, he was one of the people who helped to establish the library in Harlem that James Baldwin was also autodidactic and being self-taught. One of my favorite authors in the world. I love James Baldwin. That was able to get information unfettered and unfiltered by institutions, especially Christian institutions. So check that out. Very, very.
I did. Like I said, we have a list. When this goes out, right now it's live, but then I'll repost it, and I also will chop it up a little bit into smaller chunks. I always put a reading list in there, so I will include James Baldwin and I saw Hubert Harris. But what was the author's name again?
Dr. Brian Kwoba, Kwoba.
Okay. I will make sure that both of those gentlemen are in there, and a link to their book in Amazon, which is probably the easiest place to get it.
Yeah, that's the easiest one. And then you can also go to the UCOM website to get it as well. But in actuality, if you guys go to the blacknonbelievers.org, we do have a recommended reading list.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah. So
that's great. I'll link that as well.
Please, check that out. One of the other books that I highly recommend, especially for Black folk who happen to be secularists, is Black Freethinkers, written by one of our board members, Dr. Chris Cameron, who talks about different figures throughout the years who happen to be Black and secular, including one of my favorite figures is Zora Neale Hurston. I love her as well. Lorraine Hansberry, Langston Hughes, even Frederick Douglass. And even W.E.B. Du Bois, who end up becoming more agnostic as time went on. So check that out. So much stuff, guys. So check the websites.
You've been fantastic, and you've given us so much information to read now as well. But again, thank you. As Larry said too, you were terrific. This was such a great conversation. I've been waiting to have it with you because I knew you'd be good at it anyways. I knew you'd have so much to say that our viewers would just to hear it from a different perspective. I don't mind talking to white people, obviously, but it's not the same experience. We have our own challenges, but it's different. And the things that you've said tonight were eye-opening and just extremely interesting. And we all share the same thing, which is we need to know. We have a critical thinking sort of bent to our head that says, I need to have an answer to this. And we've all gone down maybe different paths to get here, but here we are. And I think that's one of the things that unites us is it's disbelief's not the right way of saying it, but it's just this idea that we want to understand the world we live in a little better, and we're not willing to just accept what we were told and dogmatically. So fantastic. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. And you see my co-host right here.
I do. Well. Your co-host is a fantastic little sidekick there. And for everyone else that's listening, again, if you're live or if you're watching this later, we do this as frequently as we can. If you're interested in being a guest, let us know. We're always interested in talking to people from different walks of life to see that person who's out there that's struggling with this, and they want to have some answers, and they want to see someone like themselves. So just reach out to us. Our next topic, our next interview, I should say, is coming up, I think, on the 27th with Carlos. He is another atheist here in Chicago area. So we're going to talk to him. And then in the first week or two of August, we've got another speaker come up, Allie Jackson. And then we're also doing the Unholy Roundtable, where we're going to accumulate a bunch of your questions, and we're going to have 4 or 5 people as a round table, and we'll just answer those questions. So we've got a lot of exciting things coming up to sort of round out our summer. But in the meantime, if you have any questions, reach out to us or reach out to Cynthia. We're happy to answer them. And I appreciate it. And thank you, everybody, for joining. And we'll talk to everybody later.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Bye.